to our November 5th meeting of the Union County Board of Commissioners. And if you'd like, we'll begin our meeting with an invocation, so if you would wish to, please join me. Heavenly Father, we are told that if we lack wisdom, we need only ask, and that you will provide it liberally and without admonishment. So tonight, Lord, we pray for wisdom through a sense of faith. For in doubting, we are simply like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. And so, having received wisdom, help us to prioritize our direction. Give us each a servant attitude, recognizing that we serve at the will of the people. Help us to put aside any self-interest and to work collectively in the best interest of our community. Lord, help us to pursue your will in all that we do, understanding that as a part of this republic, we have a responsibility to uphold the principles and values upon which it is based. As elected representatives of the people, may we serve humbly, with malice towards none, and charity for all. Finally, Father, allow us to be purposeful in our actions and discussions. May all that we do serve to bring about more efficient and effective government and a greater level of safety, opportunity, and quality of life for our citizens. We are blessed here in Union County with a strong economy. As we near the season of giving, may we not forget that despite our abundance, there are many in need. Lord, for those who struggle with issues regarding their health, their finances, their mental or emotional well-being, may they experience your love and grace through us. May we also never forget all those who serve and protect, that we may enjoy safety and liberty. For all those in uniform, both at home and abroad, we pray for their peace and protection. Help them to know they are loved and appreciated for their daily sacrifice. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. Amen. We have a special treat this evening in that we have with us members of Cub Scout Pack 140. And they're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join our representatives from Cub Scout Pack 140 in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Awesome. It's always exciting when we can see our future leaders in action. That was a great job you did. We want you all to have a Union County pin so you'll remember this opportunity. Good job. Well, quite well. Thanks for coming. Next item is our our employee recognition. And Ms. Cotto, would you like to lead us in this? Comment on this?
Actually, I would ask Michelle Lancaster to give us some background information on this.
Thank you, Ms. Cotto. Chairman Simpson, board members, each year the Violence Prevention Task Force hosts an award luncheon to recognize individuals for their work in the community in violence prevention and intervention. There are 7 categories, and this year at the 10th Annual Violence Prevention and Intervention Awards Luncheon, on October 29th, we had 4 employees who were recognized in those categories. So they're here tonight. I asked them to come because I thought it was important for them to receive recognition in front of the board and publicly. It was a really great event where the nominees were all recognized, and I would also add that we had numerous county employees that were nominated, and these 4 individuals stood out in their categories. So I'm just going to ask them to stand so that you can recognize them. The first honoree is Ashley Lance, who is our Social Services Division Director, and Ashley was awarded in the category of advocacy and us. She was with Turning Point and has spent most of her career working to help in the community in the areas of intervention and violence prevention. Our second category was law enforcement, and Detective James May is here. And James was with the Sheriff's Office, and he was awarded, out of a group of 4 nominees, he was seen as the award winner this year on behalf of the Sheriff's Office, and we want to thank Detective May as well. And then for public health, we have Karen Drake, who is one of our public health nurses, and she was awarded in the category of medical services and the work that she does in our program in public health. And then last, we had Katie Turner, senior social worker and child welfare, who was awarded out of 10 nominees in the social services category. So I just wanted to take the chance here tonight to recognize them for the hard work that they do on behalf of Union County, our residents and children and family that they work with every day.
Congratulations to each of you. Your efforts don't go unnoticed. So thanks for being with us this evening. Our next item is our informal comments, and we have no one signed up to speak. So we will go to our additions, deletions, and adoption of the agenda. Mr. Rush.
I'd like to take item number 8 off the consent agenda. I'm sorry, number 6. I apologize. My eyesight's not very good. Number 6.
Okay, we'll make that 16A under old business.
Moving it or taking it off?
To take it off completely until a later date.
Until a later date? Okay.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
this
absolutely.
is a bid award. At this point in time, I do not know how long we have with respect to a guaranteed price with respect to this particular bid. This is an item that was approved in the board's 2011 and 2016 master plan. This is the solution to Waxaw. As you recall, and I believe it was in May, you all adopted the Waxaw system going forward. And this was the alternative solution and the cheaper solution from the perspective of we had 2 options available to us. One was to go through the middle of downtown Waxhaw to replace 4-inch and 8-inch sewer mains, or to do the Blythe Creek alternative, which is taking off some of our grinder pump stations that we have, which are very high in maintenance, and providing the alternative there. So we've had this item before the board on numerous occasions, and I would request that it not acted on this evening, but that is certainly at the board's discretion.
You'd like to move it to the regular agenda then and discuss it? That'd be
We
fine.
can do that. Okay. Make it 16A under old business. We will have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve as amended.
Have a motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Takes us to our consent. Motion to approve consent is amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And take us to old business. Mr. Rushing.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When is the bid award date for this? When does it have to be awarded?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I do not have that off the top of my head.
Anybody on staff know that
No,
answer?
I don't believe there is.
So month,
I don't know.
2 months?
We're not sure. We
Can-
could have to go find out.
Can we find out?
I can try if you'd like.
Okay. There, some concerns I have we identified all the property owners that we've discussed in the past? That we were unable to identify some of those property owners?
My understanding is that we are now in possession of all of the easements that were, that the board authorized the county attorney, I think it was on June 18th, in order to acquire those easements. All of those easements have in fact been acquired. I think, and I'm certainly not going to speak for our county attorney, but not all, there were a few that had to be, I think, through condemnation.
We had to institute a total of 7 condemnations. They've all been filed as quick take authority by filing of the complaints. We now have the easements. 2 of the condemnations were the same group of people that owned the property. One of the condemnations where we got 2 of the people to sign and the third wouldn't sign, so we had to condemn their 1/3 interest in the property. But we now have all easements. So the county has acquired those easements.
The other concern I had, we discussed those pump stations on the south side of that, and it's my understanding from discussions with staff that some of those were replaced within the last 4 years.
Grinder pump stations are not what I would describe as long-term solutions to providing sewer, because they are, I mean, you see them in a lot of situations where if you have a septic tank having to pump into a system, they have them at individual homes. And so they are not necessarily a high-cost item, and we have to maintain all of those. So this removes quite a number of those grinder pump stations where all of the flow will go into a centralized pump station, which cuts down on cost and maintenance.
How many years have they been used there?
I do not know.
10 or more? I mean,
As old as
yes.
these neighborhoods are, I would suspect longer than that.
1980s, maybe? It said they were installed in the 1980s. Right,
Yes, that's what it states in the agenda abstract.
okay. I guess the thought I have is that usually we require developers to extend those lines, especially like a gravity line. For whatever reason, we're doing it on the south side. I can see completely the Blythe Creek interceptor and taking those pump stations off and gravity flowing to that, which is already there, probably at a lesser cost. The concern I have is the southeast side of Highway 75, where we'll be extending across the road. It looks like there's a lot of developable land there that probably a developer in some point in the future would want to come and pay to extend those lines across the road. So I have no issue. I think it would give immediate service to the town of Waxhaw to have that hooked into the Blythe Creek interceptor on the northwest side of 75, but that southeast side is the one I have concerns with. So, if it would be my vote not to do it at all, not to award the bid if we can't put it off, so we can look at that and maybe get some more information with that. If there is any developers that are interested in doing that, if it would save us some cost, I would like to see us try to do it that way. Several people who've tried to purchase properties there in the past have made that comment to me, is why would the county extend those gravity lines? And the pump stations, the gravity or the grinder pumps that have been on that southeast side, like I said, my understanding have been replaced within the last 4 to 5 years. Is that correct, or am I mistaken on that?
I believe when you and I spoke about this probably a couple of months ago, yes, some of them had been replaced within the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
But as I stated, they're not usually a long-term solution. This project is in keeping with the board direction that was received, I believe it was in 2011, in which staff was directed to work with our municipal governments in order to provide utility services to their downtown areas. We worked with Mineral Springs. We have an arrangement with the town of Stallings. And this was what was presented to the board as early as February of 2016 as the solution associated with Waxhaw. We brought it back to you again on May 21st of 2018, and then on June 18th of 2018, the board also authorized for this project the condemnation if necessary. So this has been a project that dates back to 2011 in the original water and wastewater master plan.
And again, the northwestern portion of that, in those neighborhoods of several, 8 to 10 pump stations maybe in those neighborhoods, I believe?
I don't have an exact
Many-
number. What I can say is that when the board approved the Waxhaw study back in May, and then when you authorized the condemnation, staff certainly took that as a authorization from the board to move forward with completing the final design of the project and bidding the project, and that is what we are presenting before you this evening.
In order to take action, we need a motion.
Can I ask a question before we do? One of the concerns that I have on it is, and you made a comment.
Can we get a motion, Commissioner Helms, that we can have discussion at great lengths, but we need a motion as to the direction or the action we're going to take.
I was trying to wait until Jeff got back with the answer on the time sensitivity, I guess, of it, so I was trying to kill some time for Jeff. I apologize.
All right, we'll continue on, Commissioner Helms.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going, because I'd like to see it move till next week to have time. I know that there's 5 parcels that were in question, and you said you got a third of it?
No, Commissioner Helms, we have condemned all properties, and under quick take authority, once the lawsuit is filed, we have the easement. So the
Okay.
lawsuits have been filed.
Okay. I'd like to have a little time to have more understanding of that, to be honest. And putting it off on next board meeting's agenda would allow us that time and have everybody have their questions answered. And that's the motion I'm making.
Okay, we have a motion, further discussion. I would say I think we've danced around this issue for quite some time. It was an action and an effort that the board took to update our municipalities years and years ago. I think it's time to move forward.
Question, is this the same action that the town of Waxhaw sent a letter of support?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Further discussion.
I'll tell you, I talked to the town of Waxhaw, and they said they know of no urgency. They reached out to the community for urgency, and they hadn't been communicated recently concerning this issue. So I think waiting 2 weeks is not going to hurt us.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Yates has tried to contact the county's procurement director and did reach her. She doesn't have those documents at home, of course, and she's not able to determine how long those bids are open for. So we can't answer that question this evening. What the board can do if you decide not to take action is to call a special meeting, should it be necessary, on 48 hours notice.
Okay, we have a motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Takes us to new business. Presentation of the comprehensive annual report for the fiscal year ended June 30th.
Mr. Yates, would you like to introduce our auditor?
Tonight, we have with us Eddie Burke, who is the partner in charge of our audit with Cherry Beckert. Cherry Beckert, I believe, has done our audit 4 years now. Is that right? That's right. So he's going to present to you tonight a little bit about the audit, wrap up a little bit. We'll have further conversation about the results of the audit and the financials related to fund balance and other things at a later date. This is completion of that process. It's been accepted by the state. We found that out at the end of last week. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Burke and let him kind of go through. Your presentation should be loaded up. All you have to do is hit the PowerPoint button.
Okay. Good evening. It's great to be with you tonight. What I would like to try to do in going through the results for the year ended June 30, 2018 audit is basically talk about four things. First, I'd like to introduce the client service team that worked on the audit this year. Second, talk a little bit about what our role is when we are doing your audit. And then there are some key highlights. There's a one-pager in here that sort of summarizes the results of everything. And then I got some general comments that I will make preceding that. First, I did serve as the engagement partner. Dan Gaudry, who I think has been presenting to the commissioners the last couple of years, he served as the senior manager on the engagement. And then we also had a senior accountant and a staff accountant with Dan who helped out with the audit. As far as our role is concerned, the first part of the audit is where we plan the engagement, and that started several months ago where we sat down with management and we got an update on what had happened during the year and any key things to be looking for during the early parts of the audit. And from that information, we built what we referred to as an audit plan. The audit plan included a number of things, including looking, reviewing, and analyzing the internal control environment, and then from that, determining the types of things that we were going to be doing to verify the account balances, the assets and the liabilities, the revenues and expenses that were included in the financial statements. Once that was done and we completed, we get to this point where we're issuing our opinion. We actually have issued 4 opinions, which I'll go through in just a few minutes. And then finally, from a communication perspective, as part of one of the deliverables, there is a letter including in your package that discusses a number of things. First, what our responsibilities are, any changes in estimates, any changes in policies, procedures, whether or not there are any adjusting journal entries, those types of things. And like I said, that is included as part of one of the letters that you have received. From a summary perspective and results, I mentioned that you did receive 4 opinions from us. The first opinion on the financial statements, that's where we're issuing an opinion on the financial statements themselves. The Yellow Book report, that is where we come in and we look at the control environment, and we also look and test to see whether or not you're complying with GS 159 as it relates to the county. And then the last 2 reports over federal and state grants, you receive large amounts of funding from the federal and the state government. That requires that the county have what we refer to as a single audit. That's where we come in and we look at the control environment around the controls over the grants, and then we actually go in and test compliance to make sure you're administering those grants according to the requirements. You did receive an unmodified opinion on all the grants. We found the control environment to be working effectively in all regards, and we also found the county was administering those programs in accordance to the requirements that go along with the funding. There were no adjusting journal entries. There were no past adjusting journal entries. Basically, the numbers that we were given, we opined on by the county, which indicates that they have a good process. They're doing a good job at keeping the books and records clean for you throughout the year. The biggest change you will notice when you're looking at the financial statements is there was one new reporting standard that was required to be implemented by the county. That is a requirement that was affected all state and local governments across the United States. It's GASB Statement 75. And basically what that required the county and other local governments to do is your other post-employment benefit obligation, which had historically, the majority of it had been disclosed in the financial statements. You are required to report that as a liability on your financial statements. So if you go to the last note in the financial statements, it gives you an outline of what the impact was to the financial statements. There were 2 management letter comments. They were both more around clearly defining some policies and procedures over some grant activities. There's some procedures in there where we recommended to management that they basically clarify that and just make sure there's no misunderstanding on how to implement some of that. It was just an observation that we noted. It wasn't nothing critical or anything like that. From the internal control perspective, we basically looked at 3 areas. The first being the major cycles or processes that the county uses to process numbers that go into the financial statements. Under significant cycles, those are your key cycles that generates numbers. For those cycles, we looked, made sure they were well defined, they were well documented, and they were controls over the key areas to make sure if something did happen, it would get caught internally. We did look at journal entries. We looked at journal entries throughout the year, and then we also looked at entries at the end of the year to make sure that any entries that were being closed out, they all made sense. And we were also looking at your controls around journal entries, making sure that there is policies and procedures around that, you were following those. And then finally, we were looking for the types of journal entries that were being made, just to see if we were looking at finding entries where there was a lot of adjustments being made to original postings. And then finally, we did look at IT. Primarily, we were looking at the general overall controls of over the IT operations of the county. And we did look at some general best practices with cyber security too. As far as significant audit areas, this is the area where we spent the time crunching numbers. I'm not going to go through all the details, but basically what we were doing, we did a lot of confirmation work where we reached out to third parties that y'all had done business with. They told us the dollar amounts involved, and we reconciled that back to your books. We were reviewing actuarial reports. We were doing a lot of vouching. We were doing a lot of, we were verifying cutoff to make sure you had a good cutoff of revenues, expenses, payroll at the end of the year, and a number of other things that we felt needed to be done just to make sure that the numbers that are reflected in your financial statements can be relied upon by you and other third parties. As far as single audit was concerned, we actually looked at 8 programs. We looked at 6 federal programs, and then we looked at 2 state programs. Primarily what we were doing there, the process, we looked at the administrative controls. We looked for any monitoring reports that had been received by the county from any other third parties who had come in and reviewed any of the grant activity to see if they had identified anything. And then we looked at the compliance metrics or the key areas, and we looked at the control environment, and of course we looked at and did compliance testing. And like I said earlier, we found the county to have administered the grants in accordance with the requirements that went along with that. And then in just summary, the 4 opinions, they were all clean. No past adjusting journal entries, no adjusting journal entries, no significant findings. The 2 management letter comments I think I brought up. And I would like to thank Jeff and other individuals that we worked with, department heads and the others in this department, to the cooperation and assistance that we received. There's a lot that goes in to the audit. I mean, I think from start to finish, we were working on this about 4 months, something along those lines. And we didn't work 4 solid months, but we were in and out over a 4-month period of time. So the deadline was met, like Jeff indicated, to the Local Government Commission, and at that point, I'm happy to answer any questions you have in regards to the audit for June 30, 2018.
We appreciate your diligence and service to the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is our appointments to boards and committees. First of those being Carolina's Healthcare System Union Advisory Council.
Yes, sir, you have 2 nominations to be made to the Carolina Healthcare System. They will actually make the appointments. Yours are nominations only. You have 3 applications and 2 vacancies.
Mr. Harrison.
Yes, I recommend, in his application, he says Wayneburg, and then Richard Helms be nominated for those positions.
Any others? Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I will add Norwood Davis, or Harris, rather, to that nomination. And I guess, Mr. Chairman, the reason I do that, and I appreciate my colleague for recognizing Richard Helms, he did apply, and I applaud him for doing so. I know he has served on that board in the past and done so well. And when I saw his application, before I had even looked at the other two, I had some concerns, and after I looked at the other two, all three are certainly qualified candidates in which I believe could serve. I have, I guess, a couple of concerns, and I would allow Commissioner Helms to interject if he so chooses. I guess my biggest concern is having served on that board in the past, and with the pending EMS negotiations and the contract coming up, I have some concerns that there's going to be a perceived conflict of interest with someone serving in dual capacity, both as an advisor to this board while serving on this board, but then also serving in the capacity of a trustee with the entity in which we're negotiating the EMS contract. And so that's probably my biggest concern. Second to that, of course, is I feel like in appointing a commissioner in that particular role, we're really denying the citizens the right to have an input. You know, we advertise these board positions and we basically beg people to apply, and in this case we have three very qualified candidates, one being the commissioner who, in my opinion, already has an input because that board serves as an advisor to this board. So, you know, I question the perception when we're asking people to apply for boards, but then instead of applying qualified citizens who want to be involved, we're denying them that right by assigning that position to someone who already holds an elected office. So that's my only reason for adding Mr. Harris, and the reason I will support those two.
Mr. Helms?
Mr. Chairman, yes. It's true, I was on that board before. It's an advisory board to the hospital. And I withdrew from that board when we were doing the hospital purchase negotiations. I felt like that was a conflict. I don't know that I agree that the EMS contract it's in place. It's something I've spoken with the hospital. It is as in some of our other boards, we have commissioners participating in boards, and that's a good insight for the board to have. So I would like to still be considered and would welcome the opportunity to serve with that fine organization again.
Mr. Rush?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At one time, a commissioner served on that board. Did that get taken away at some point?
No.
When we did the new lease agreement with the hospital, the entire board structures were changed as part of those lease negotiations.
And that's when I came off.
Mm-hmm. And I, like I said, I have no problem. I think it would be valuable for a commissioner to be involved with that as much as we do with the hospital. So I don't have a problem with Commissioner Helms serving on that if he'd like to.
Okay, we have three nominations. Vernon Wade Berg, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Norwood D. Harris, all in favor, aye. Richard B. Helms, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Richard. Next is our Cardinal Innovations Piedmont Community Board.
Yes, sir, you have two vacancies on their Community Oversight Board. One is for a consumer or family member representative, and one is a community stakeholder representative. You have Mr. Lindberg, who has applied for reappointment, and you have Mr. Anderson, who has applied and would be eligible for the consumer or family member representative.
Commissioner Rushing?
Motion to approve Mr. Lindberg and Mr. Anderson.
We have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. County manager's comments.
No comments this evening.
Commissioner Akmus.
No comments.
Commissioner Harrison.
No comments.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask that we all be in prayer for the young man who was injured on the football field this week. I understand that he's in pretty rough shape, and that we be considering him in our prayers as we go through. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Helms.
No comment.
My only comment is a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.